talking to? What are you trying to prove to everyone else? Who is superior? How is your vision clearer than anyone else? Your head's in the sky, in flight, but you will crash and burn. But you will crash it!
All right, welcome to Agency Land, a podcast about advertising, ambition, and the lies we tell ourselves to survive both. I'm Jai Smith, and this is your survival guide. Today's guest is not an agency person. He's never run an agency, never held an agency title, never sat on an agency organizational chart, but he spent more time in agency rooms than most agency people ever will. He began at Austereo, leading promotions for marketing for Triple M, Today FM, before leaving in '99 to become a keynote speaker. In 2002, he founded the Ideas Vault, the first creative thinking venue, working with agencies, corporates for over a decade. He's written 6 books, I'd actually lost count, including Who Stole My Mojo, and won the TEC Speaker of the Year 3 times. He co-founded Tour to Cure, raising over $35 million for cancer research, hosts the Mojo Sessions podcast, which of course I'm very intimate with, and serves as a volunteer deputy captain with the New South Wales Fire Service. Today's guest is Gary. Welcome, Gary. How are you?
Very well. Good to see you, mate.
Very good to see you. Mate, you spent 8 years at Austereo and you got up to the grand title of Group GM of Promotions and Marketing. You know, that's really high energy, really commercial, really media. What did those first years teach you about ideas and how they work or don't work inside big organizations?
It's really interesting because the ideas, there was different parts of ideas in Radio Land. And there was ideas as in writing script and writing commercials. And I had a lot of really good mates that were copywriters. And I actually lived with a copywriter, Rusty Graham, one of the copywriters who's still in radio today up in Brisbane. I think he's with Nova. And living with Rusty and working with him and giving him a brief, I watched the creative process for a writer.
Yeah.
That was different to a sales guy coming in saying, hey, PlayStation have got 250 grand. They need a promotion that we need to run in May. We're pitching against whoever. And in those days, best idea wins. That was a different sort of creativity. So what I learned was there's different types of thinking, different types of requirements that all came with budget and mostly time constraint. Because quite often Rusty was just pumping stuff out to satisfy a timeline. And even the client would put pressure on us. Coke would come to us and say, hey, we need an idea. We need it by 5 o'clock on Friday. Quite often I'd say, well, if you want an idea by Friday, get an idea. If you want a great idea, you need to give me till Monday.
Yeah.
So I think reflecting on that, it was a really good example of different sorts of briefs, different sorts of timings, the pressure comes onto it, and creativity needs time. And if I wanted something great with Rusty, I had to give him time. And, you know, Jai, sometimes I'd be going to go to the station at 7 a.m. and Rusty would be coming home. I'd be going,
wow.
Where have you been? And he said, I had this idea, woke up and I had to go in. So he'd go to the studio at 3 o'clock in the morning and do something, and he'd be coming home for his nap and I'd be going to work. So I learned about creativity, timing, and giving people space to create.
Can those ideas have too much time? Can you give creatives too long, do you reckon?
I think you can. I think, David Ogilvy once said, give me the freedom of a tight brief. I think you need to, you do need to have a deadline. Because I think great creatives are great at spending time to think. But if you don't have a deadline, they will get distracted. It'll be squirrels.
Yeah.
And so I think you do have to have a deadline, because I think that gives them the framework to work from, to go, I've got till Tuesday. Now I can forget about it, come back to it, forget about it, come back to it. But if you don't have a deadline, I think that tends to be elongated. So yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned before around there are different types of ideas, I think that's really important. You know, there are business ideas, there are script ideas, there are copy-driven ideas, there are promotional ideas. In your experience, what were the strongest in those first years? What really worked at Austereo during those days? And do you think it still holds true today?
No, I think the principles, the first principles you go to, I think are the same today. Like I learned a lot from Austereo Austereo as an entity during those periods, it gave me crystallized the fact that there is a process, there is a strategy that sits behind this stuff. I think I'd been doing a lot of it in retail when I worked in department stores and for Westfield shopping towns and stuff like that back in the day. I was doing a lot of it, but I didn't understand how it all sat together with strategy and structure. So yeah, I think there is a format and a structure to it when I look back on it. I think what happened at Austereo when I got there the first couple of years gave me rigor, because I came out of retail into shopping centers. My first gig in radio was Triple M. Those days, man, it was rock and roll.
Yeah.
Like it was dead set rock and roll. You know, it was just unpredictable. It was all about the craft. It was all about having fun. It was all about just seizing the moment. You know, you'd be at your office trying to create ideas to take money away from competitors and win this brief. Somebody would run in, a Slash would run in and say, "Hey, we've got Bon Jovi just walked in," and you would go in the studio and hang out for an hour and just watch these guys jam. It was that sort of environment of hard partying. It was almost like that, you know, the agency world of Mad Men. Like it was kind of that. Whereas Austereo was very structure. It was very strategy. It was very heavily research driven, very bottom line driven. So I think in those early days, it also gave me the understanding of how different cultures and formats work to draw ideas out and the freedom you give a creative. Is that the same today? No, because it's a different media landscape. It's a different pace. There's so many different inputs, so many different outputs. So I would say, no, it's different. However, the principles of how a creative comes up with ideas, and the process of stimulus, inputs, all that sort of stuff, giving yourself time, jotting down notes, curating ideas, having a repository for them in a folder somewhere. I think all those principles, regardless of who it is over the passage of time, remains the same. But how that's expressed is very different today.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's that relationship between time, culture, and structure that really lets creativity breathe or not, or succeed or fail or come up with some innovation there. When you did leave Austereo and you went out on your own as a keynote speaker, you had a really senior corporate role, a really clear career path, I imagine, in kind of these bigger organizations. What made you walk away from it all?
The short answer is I was at the Hordern Pavilion and I was watching a keynote speaker who's one of the best in the world. And it was 1,500 people. And he said, grab a piece of paper, grab your journals, write down, what are you going to be doing in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What do you want? Not what you think you can do or what do you want? Just dream big, don't worry about money, whatever. And I wrote it all down. And I went to the break and I was with a guy called Christopher Whitnell who ran a speaking training organization. And I went, man, I got nothing about radio here.
Yeah, wow.
Zero. There was nothing about radio. And I went, what am I doing? And I remember saying to him, we're in the break. I remember exactly where I was. And I said, I think I'm going to make a change. I'm going to quit. I'll give it a year. So I'll do this, do that. And he said, what are you waiting for? And so pretty much the next day I went to work and resigned. So I had learned that I had the dreams and aspirations. I knew what I wanted. I've always been good at seeing what I wanted and going and getting it. And it wasn't in radio. And I was just peddling squares. Like I was like, well, why am I waiting? You know, what am I waiting for? And so I remember went to Peter Harvey, who was the chairman of Austereo at the time, former Clemenger Harvey, and said, Pete, I'm out. And he said, and I remember him he said, I'll come and work with me personally. Like come and work with me as my, aide de camp. I went, I don't have any future in radio. I'm kind of done. I've done what I want to do. And I didn't love what I was doing. I found it very stressful, and the fun of rock and roll radio and Triple M and Doug and Uncle Doug, all that stuff had gone. And I quit.
If you think about you walking away back then, I know you to be very reflective. I know you to be goal oriented. Was there something else going in your life at that point that you hadn't looked back or in this case forward to think about what that might be? Or why was it keynote speaking at the same time that really drew you in?
I don't know how old you are, Jai. I don't know if you remember a movie called Good Morning Vietnam.
I do. I know the movie really well, actually. So mainly because Dad is a fan, but I know it well.
Yeah. So there's a scene in the movie where Robin Williams is chasing a girl, ends up in this classroom, and he's teaching the Vietnamese people how to speak English. And there's this moment where he he's just teaching them street English. And he teaches one of these old men a word. The old man finally gets it. And he went, yes. And the joy that Robin Williams had in his eyes at that moment, I went, that's what I want to do. I want to teach.
Yeah.
But I thought if I go into teaching with kids and the institution of teaching, I will fail because I'm not that sort of institutional thinker. And I thought maybe I'll teach adults like this guy was. It was on stage. And I went, I could do that. And I remember Christopher Whitnell, who was the guy that I spoke to outside those doors. I rang him and said, hey, I'm going to quit. I want to start, training and stuff. First of all, I started training. And I went to his office and I sat in the corner of his office with a telephone on a milk crate.
Yeah.
True story. And I started ringing all the people I knew from Pepsi and Gatorade and Commonwealth Bank. And I got a gig at MTV. So I just rang everybody I knew and said, hey, can I come and do training and speak at your gigs? And I'll do it for free, which I did. So I did it for free for a year. And that's how it started. And I started training and doing 2, 3, 4-day trainings. Back in the day, that was doable. Then I realized it's not what I wanted to do. But I wanted to keynote. I wanted to do 45 minutes and go home. And so I had to change the whole category of trainer and workshops, change that whole language into keynotes and just change that whole thing around over a number of years. Because that's what I wanted to do.
This is probably more for my own personal education, but I've got to ask you because I do a lot of training, a lot of workshops, a lot of mentoring these days, like in a professional sense of, I work with somebody for 3 months. I've discovered 3 months is about as long as I can work with somebody before my ADD kicks in. But also I think they get the better part of me. But what makes a great 45-minute keynote? Like for me as a workshopper and like a lot of agency people are, what's the gem you're looking for in 45 minutes? What are you hunting for the whole time in that 45 minutes as the audience or the speaker?
I was taught early on that if you're on your feet in front of an audience, they're going to judge you in 2 ways. Did I learn something? And did I enjoy the process?
Yeah.
And so I remember I did a series of gigs called A Day of Inspiration. And I rang a whole bunch of keynote speakers that I knew or people I thought were pretty good. And it was a charitable thing, raising money for the prevention, cure, and support of cancer in men, women, and children. The whole thing was for free. And, I had some of the best. And I had entertainers like, back in the day, Leo Sayer, and I would ring gold medalists and high performers and, I just bang them all together. They'd all speak for free, 400 or 500 people at the Sheraton Ballroom. And I remember during that time, Joe, that I had a number of gold medalists that I had, and I'd MC it. Speakers would speak. And I had a number of gold medalists and they get on stage and they were really ordinary. And I went, people are going home and go, I saw this really high profile gold medalist today.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything? No. And then the others would go, I saw this girl today. I remember her name. Did you learn something? I got so much out of it. And I thought if you're either someone who is big on content, which makes that memorable, or you're someone on profile, but you got nothing to share. And I was never going to be the gold medalist and didn't aspire to be, but I wanted to be driven by content. And so 45 minutes is content, for me, content driven. And my stuff is very, very takeaway driven.
Yeah.
You're going to have takeaways you can execute. And the enjoyment part for me is I'm not a comedian. I'm not a gag guy, but I've learned to find stories.
Yeah.
So I collect stories, as in Matthew Dix, who's the 50-odd time Moth winner, who's one of the best storytellers in the world. I take a lot from his work is collecting stories to put together. Take the content that works. It's actionable. You can make the choice to go and do something with it and then build a story around it that resonates with people.
Yeah. Look, I think that's so true. And I love how succinctly you put that around, like, did I learn something and did I enjoy the process? I think a lot of things boil down to those 2 points. I think that's great. I had never really looked deeply into the ideas vault in Moore Park or Entertainment Quarter in '02. But I imagine that was about 10 years, agencies, corporates, everyone brought their teams to that space. That's fascinating for me because I think those venues and those ideas, again, co-working before it was, work it and all those different spaces. I think those things are missing. When you watched agency teams walk through those doors, what did you notice about how they operated compared to other sorts of more standard corporate teams? If we just focus on agencies for a moment.
The ideas vault came from my first 10 years of doing gigs, walking into hotel rooms with a square table in it, beige walls, no color, no nothing. And you know that, you are a visual guy, and you know that 40 to 45% of all people are visual. The other biggest percentage of people are kinesthetic. They had to feel, they're going to feel things. They want to relax. It's how you feel, the kinesthetic learners. The smallest percentage are auditory, but many facilities are set up for the auditory people. You sit there and talk, but only the smallest percentage of people learn in an auditory sense. So I just saw the opportunity, and I remember I was doing a gig in San Diego, and I remember going for a walk one morning with Christopher, and I said, I got this idea. He said, what do you mean? I said, I got this idea for this place. And the genesis of it came from Patch Adams. Patch Adams, who was a famous doctor, seen the movie where he builds this hospital out of salt and pepper shakers and all that sort of stuff. And I went, I could do that in the corporate environment. That would bring out creativity because it's color, it's relaxing, it's how creativity is supposed to be. I put in my own barista. So I had my own, this is back in the day before coffee really took off. I had my own barista, my own coffee shop. I controlled all the food because all mood comes from the gut. So I just built this thing in my mind. I remember talking with Christopher and saying, this is my idea. When I actually finished it and I designed it, the first iteration of it, and Christopher walked in, he went, GB, this is exactly what I saw in my mind when you described it to me in San Diego 6 months ago. So that's the genesis of building it. And then when agency land people came in with client, whether it be Diageo or Telstra, I mean, the top end of town, all the big buildings in town, they all used the venue. The difference was, I think, when agencies came in with clients, they became one. Yeah. There was no head of the table. Everyone just came in and everyone just crashed on a beanbag, sat on a ball, went outside and sat under a tree, on a blanket. Everybody became one. And so the learning environment was created. The creativity environment was created. Now I'm suddenly just sitting with a group of people with a common objective, with food that's created for the right environment, with coffee that was done for the right environment. I had 6 flip charts and I didn't charge per flip chart. You just got the room. And I had 6 flip charts. There was shit up on the walls. Yeah. There was music, and it was booked out. It was booked out. Yeah, wow. 5-6 days of the week. I mean, we even had, In Excess use the room. Wow. We had the Swans use the room, the Sydney Swans. So it was not just agency land. It became just a place to chill and think differently.
It's interesting because this is before big tech. So there was no Googleplex where having a colored room was interesting. Like no one did this in 2002 at all, like right up until like 2010. I think we saw the explosion of, the ping pong table in the office and the agencies with the, we kind of always had table tennis tables, but they were always a thing. But just designing an environment, an atmosphere that actually breed creativity, not just going to the office. Like even I still think to this day, lighting, and you're right, I am visual. Lighting is such a broken function of workspaces. And I'm, Double Star, and I am a huge believer in in-office collaboration for 100 different reasons. I've talked about on this podcast quite a bit now, but lighting for us is so important for how people sit, behave, react, their sensory capacity, sensory overload, if they need to wake up, if they need to calm down. It's just something that's left to chance, but I think that's such a powerful thing to build. Why did it wrap up? Why did you wrap it up in 2012, I assume?
Well, I actually sold it to my barista. So I never actually wrapped it up.
Yeah.
I go through phases where I can do something, then I see something. I don't want my identity to be attached to any particular thing. But what I wrote down at the Hordern Pavilion with that keynote speaker that day for 10, 15 years in the future was to have a cattle property, on a trout stream, a couple of hours from Sydney. I wanted to run cattle, have horses. I wanted to cowboy up. And I found the property, bought the property. And then I found myself, wanting to spend more time doing what I wanted to do. And I'd done it for 10 years. I'd built this thing. My barista was this young kid. He just had a baby. I thought, it's a massive opportunity for you to do what you want to do. And he went, yeah, man, I'll take it over.
Amazing.
And I'd done it. And so I just, wanted to move to the country and be in the country. And then I wanted to prove that you could do, this is way before the sort of
the
work from home thing happened.
Change. Yeah. Tree change.
Yeah, the treat change. I wanted to prove that I could live in the country and make a successful go of a beef business, as well
Yeah.
as maintain some sort of identity. And so that was the challenge just for me personally. So I moved to the farm and sold the shed to him.
Yeah, incredible. When I was looking through your, and there were a few, there were lots of speeches I found, but one of them was called Marketing Warfare, where you argue that marketing's broken, which again, I love telling anyone in a room full of people that what they're doing is completely broken. What's your argument for why marketing is broken?
I think today, and I was just with a group actually at NAB a month ago on this. I think where it's broken today has become very tactical, not strategic. And I think we're concentrating on the medium, not the message. And so marketing warfare and or red team thinking is being able to detach yourself from the tactical medium to get down to the message, is to go, in order to create the message, you've got to detach, map the battlefield, work out who owns what perceptually, how long they've owned it, what hill you want to take, whether it's doable or not, whether you should go frontal attack, flanking attack, which is all stuff that Austereo back in the day were very, very good at. Like that was my complete grounding in kindergarten for me, learning all that sort of stuff. That's as appropriate today as it is ever, because that is based on Sun Tzu, The Art of War, Musashi's Book of Five Rings, Goring's Show. That's based on, all the Prussian, that's based Napoleon.
Yeah.
So all that stuff is as common today, usable today, except we're very caught up now in the medium, and we have a lot of people who don't understand marketing strategy, doing a lot of stuff where you need a new website, you need a new logo, just post it here, need a TikTok channel. So that's what's changed today.
Yeah.
But the principles of marketing warfare is still one of my favorite things to ever do, is to sit with a group and map it.
And I think it's that fundamental misunderstanding of what strategy is. So a lot of teams I work with and a lot of individuals I work with want to be the strategist. They want to do the strategy. And it's a fundamental misunderstanding of strategy is about winning a market, not about winning the presentation. The presentation counts and it counts for a lot. But I agree with you. I think, looking at the art of war, looking at just modern day warfare, again, probably really topical right now, but trying to understanding, really relevant right now, what is the objective? How do you not let mission creep happen? Understanding that strategically those things remain, and, they take really a lot of research and a lot of depth, and they aren't about, as you said, the quick fire parts, that the outputs, they are about the outcomes and working towards them. And it still baffles me to this day. Some very, very big agencies and very senior people still fundamentally misunderstand what strategy is.
Absolutely. And the execution of strategy. I mean, I'd be fascinated, and it'll come out in years to come. I'd be fascinated to sit in the war room right now with the changing dynamics. Is what is the strategic imperative? What's the commander's intent? And what are the strategic imperatives, and how that's changing with some super, super bright admirals, major generals. Major General John Gronsky, who back in the day would have been in one of those war rooms right now. In fact, even Mike Sorelli, who's a former SEAL, and he was on Channel 7 only yesterday talking about the strategies and the mission. And he's been on the Mojo sessions. Those two guys were guests, and they talked about commander's intent. And I would say to them, what's your take on strategy? And he said, it's the leader's job is to know what's the North Star, like what's going to happen, and know how to get there. And that's a fundamental part of strategy that very few leaders I speak to can tell me, apart from numbers, which are normally this year, is to go 3 years' time, what's going to happen? Tell me about the battlefield, tell me what's going to change, what's going to happen in the category, what can you see happening? Where do you see your business fitting into it?
Yeah.
And tell me the 3 or 4 big things we need to do in order to get there and capitalize. That's the essence of it. And yes, then you go down to why do we do what we do, which is a critical part of building meaning for people today. But if you don't have that simple one pager, and that's why I'd be fascinated to see what's happening in a room with a leader that they currently have. But underneath that leader, there are some incredibly bright military leaders who are probably the best in the world at strategy. See what's going on. That's the stuff I get quite fascinated by. And that's what's missing in the corporate world, because we get stuck in the tactical part. We don't think about the actual strategic part. And the thing that's sad for leaders today is that people are crying out for it.
Yeah.
People are crying out for it. If the people don't have faith that my boss, the company owner, the leaders know where we're going, doesn't know how to get there, extra 10 grand, it's exfil.
Yep. Exactly. And I think, again, strategy demands leadership. And I think one of the things you were talking about that, one of those gaps that's missing is, I think I was reading, like you talk about having a strategy, being a strategist and being a great strategist. And to me, there's such a need for leadership around strategy. It's not someone's job, it's not someone's title, but it comes down to that leadership and whatever their title is, and making sure that strategy has the pressure testing, but also that bigger picture thinking, like you're talking about. You mentioned culture, and you've been working with all these different agency teams, different sizes, different cultures. When you walk into an agency room, and that's actually how we met. If I think back into an agency room, you came to train We Communications. When you walk into that agency room for the first time, what tells you whether that culture is healthy or whether it's broken?
I've always believed there's you maybe you relate to this. I always believed there's a book called From the Front of the Room. There should be, because you can tell a lot. You've done it. You do it a lot. When you stand in front of a room and you look into people's eyes and you watch how they communicate, you can tell a lot.
Yeah.
You can tell a lot from the room, from where's the leader, how's the leader interacting. You can tell a lot by how the senior leadership team are interacting. I think what I'm looking for is what's it look like, what's it sound like, what's it feel like. Go back to the sensory of learning. But you can really tell when you go in, Jai, and I love a rowdy crowd.
Yeah.
And so you can tell by the buzz in the room of conversation, where people aren't worried and curating what they say and how they say it and who's there and who's this and who's talking to who. They're just a bunch of people who have a common direction, a common why, really good sense of themselves, sense of values of the organization. You can feel it in a room. Conversely, you can feel it when you walk into, I do a lot of speaking for corporate CEOs in groups. Quite often you walk into a room and I'll be early and they'll dribble in and they will take a seat and open a laptop and put on a phone. And this is their one chance to collaborate once a month. They're paying good money to be there, yet they're not even in the room.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for, is that it's what's it look, sound, and feel like from this is a group of people with a common direction, common set of values. There's psychological safety in the room. You can just tell there's a buzz. They're rowdy and they're just happy to be there.
And I think you're right. And that's where, again, coming back to that point around room, space, lighting, coming together, not being stuck at home. I think those things create that buzz, create that culture. And I'm sure there's plenty of cultures outside of, these hyper creative ones that thrive in, quiet, deep work. And I still think creativity needs that at different times. But I think you're correct that agency culture really needs to be brought together, and that engagement, that presence of mind, that presence of emotion is really a good measure. It's, you can boil it down to vibes if you're Gen Z, but I think there's a lot going on there that you can start to extract the longer you look at it.
And I think and this is something that, you and I have heard on the Mojo sessions in the last 12 months. It wasn't by design, but there's definitely been an underlying theme around connection.
Yeah.
And from different sorts.
Yeah.
Robert Glazer talking about how values impact it. Michelle K. Johnson wrote the book with Marshall Goldsmith, The Seismic Shift in You, Tasha Urich's Shatterproof with What's Resilience. They're all coming at this, but it's all different directions, but the underlying thing is connection.
Yeah.
And you go, well, vibe's good, but how do you create it? And the easiest way for a leader is, do your people feel valued? Do they feel seen? Do they feel heard? And they feel appreciated? And it's funny when you talk to company owners or CEOs or team leaders, you can see them go for a piece of paper and you think you do. But if you're going to ask your team 4 questions, anonymous, write on a piece of paper, do you feel valued? Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? Same for children. I find that a really good way of sort of systematically saying for the individual in amongst the group, a really good group when you walk in a room feel connected.
Yeah.
And it's all leadership.
If you think about that second piece that agencies need to do well, like agencies sell their creativity, how do they actually practice that internally? And again, this is going back to where we met. When they practice their own creativity, what's that gap between what these agencies sell their businesses and how they run their own businesses? So I think as an agency, we go out there and we've got a creative process that's going to give you a great idea and sort of make you, millions of dollars. But when we think about our own creativity internally, or how we actually practice that, is there a gap between what they say they're selling and how they do it themselves internally?
It'd be a depends thing. I mean, who would know? I don't know if you can generalize on it. So I don't know, to be honest with you, because I think that'd be an individual thing at Double Star or, whoever. Maybe to draw a parallel, I think the difference is, if I draw a parallel, I think companies have a set of values, or they have a mission, or a purpose. They have our philosophically, this is what we believe in, which is good while the sun shines.
Yep. Yeah.
And as soon as the storm moves in, it goes to shit. I think that's the difference with, we sell this great vibe. What's it really like internally is doing an audit when the storm moves in. And I think creative people don't have a choice but to be creative. I don't need to give you the perfect environment, the perfect this, the perfect that. You are just a normal, curious guy. You and I go for a coffee somewhere and you're taking photos of the cold brew taps going, I don't know if I'll use that, but that's just because you can't help it. That's just what you do. And so I think the difference, it depends on, and you can tell from the front of the room, there's a responsibility for the individual with how the individual sees themselves, which is one of the greatest learnings I took from the Ideas Vault, was that environment created a belief and identity in people that they actually have got the ability to create. So I think in any agency or corporate environment, it's the individual responsibility. And if you're a creative person, you don't need to be told or create the perfect environment. You're just going to do them for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But number two is, for any agency, show me the expected behaviors or philosophies in an organization that's published as an expectation.
Yeah.
And then it's leadership's job to create the environment, whether the storm's there or it's sunny, to create the environment to give that individual the chance to do their best work, and then for teams to do their best work. So I think it's a depends situation.
Yeah.
But I do think there are some things that a leader can audit. A leader in an agency is to be able to go, okay, well, innovation, creativity is important. Well, how do people know that? Where is it kind of published? What's the expectation?
Yeah.
How am I giving people the freedom to do that when revenues are good and when revenues are shit, when we're under pressure and when we're not under pressure? But that aside, an individual, the creative, and whether it's in account service or it's in finance, or it's in the creative team itself, it doesn't matter. Everyone has the capability to create. There's an individual responsibility as well as a team responsibility.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that gap between when the chips are up and the chips are down. Like, are you still holding true to those values? Are those things you say, in front of all the staff when things are good, do those things hold true? If you really need to make a pitch, if somebody's got a bit of a personal emergency, are you still holding true to those things you say in the good times? And I just, literally just ripped a client out from under our team because they just treated us like shit. And I just said, this not worth the money. And I was really honest with them though. I said, I think I'm about to, sign a deal that might hurt us. And I said, but the moment it does, I'll call it. But I want you guys to know I'm going in eyes open. That honestly, they're probably going to screw us over. And as soon as they did, I just said, yeah, we're out, guys. Don't worry, we're getting out. And they all knew why we were doing it. Like, I was very open with them about why we were doing it. But you've got to hold yourself accountable for when things do get hard. And it's been a really good lesson to learn how vulnerable or open I can be with a team about decisions I've made in the past that I'm not 100% on, that I hate, that I regret. You realize that connectedness comes both ways. If I'm open with them, then they'll be open with me. It doesn't mean they have to carry my water, but it does mean, for me, letting go of the ego, a little bit of self-assurance. Speaking of which, you've run your own business now for more than 25 years, well more than 25 years. What's been the cost to you personally, or for your family, or for prospects? What's been the trade there to do your own thing, and would you recommend it to anyone else?
There's been no trade.
Great,
because that's what I wanted to do. So when I did it, I went chips in. There was no fallback plan. I would say the greatest learning was the day that I started at Christmas office in Hunters Hill, sitting on a milk crate, and the phone was on the floor, and I started ringing people. This is back in the hole. And I think the difference was, it was everybody, when it was Gary from Austereo, Gary from Triple M, everybody took my call.
Yeah, wow.
When it was Gary from Blue Moon Creator, they went, who? So identity-wise, that was the biggest thing. It's suddenly I had no corporate now, and suddenly I was starting from absolute scratch.
Yeah, wow.
Me personally when I started, it was Gary from Blue Moon Creative, and I built that brand up. And then when I went to Alan and Unwin, who signed my first book, and so I shut Blue Moon Creative, shut Blue Moon Marketing, got rid of all that stuff, and I just became me. I got rid of all the people that worked for me, and I just went, now I'm just my own personal brand, which is how I always wanted it. I'm a loner. I'm much better on my own. And the funny thing was, Jai, that for years of doing workshops and corporate speaking in front of company owners, at one point I fell into the trap of going, that's the construct. That's what you do.
Yeah.
You do this, and then you employ people, you build this, then you merge, you acquire. And I remember sitting with Mr. Clemenger, and he was interested in buying my agency, my company of 10 people, and we were doing marketing and workshops and stuff. And I went, "What am I doing? Like, I don't want to do this." And in fact, I was in London doing some work, and there's a guy called Roger Black who won the silver medal in the 400 meters behind Michael Johnson in Atlanta.
Yep.
And he's become a good friend of mine. He's had some heart issues recently. I was visiting him and I had, people working for me, and I was doing workshops and everything else. And I'd gone to his place, and I was sleeping in his downstairs room with him and his wife and his kids. And I woke up one morning, I had this pain in my back, and I rolled over. And I thought, what the hell is that? I pulled it out, and it was a Commonwealth Games gold medal, because it had for him, it was just stuff.
Really? Wow.
That was Roger. Anyway, and I remember going, and we went to a gig. It was down the beach area, and we drove down, and he took his silver medal with him. And he had this whole speech about, my silver medal. This is my gold medal. I never set out. I knew I couldn't beat Michael Johnson, but I set out to run my perfect race. It was a really good keynote, 45 minutes. And he was a superstar. He was doing Master Chefs and Dancing with the Stars. Like, he was commentating for the BBC, and these 45 minutes, did a whole bunch of photos with his silver medal. And then he went, "Well, that was £6,000. What do you want to do now?"
Yeah.
I went, "What do you mean?" He said, "I just got my money. What do you want to do for the rest of the day?"
Yeah.
And this was 10 o'clock in the morning. Well, let's go to the beach. Then we'll go to the club. We'll have go for a swim, and then we'll go home and play with the kids. I went, "Dude, you stole my dream. This is what I want to do."
Yeah.
And so I came back, and that's where I changed from workshops into keynotes,
Yeah.
got rid of all the people, because I realized that had always been my dream, but I'd let the construct of what you're supposed to do get in the way of seeing all these other people do it. And so I wasn't living my own perfect dream. So I came back and went, enough. And I remember I was 33 at the time, and I went, "That's it. Time to change." Has it been a cost? No, because I'm doing what I want to do. What I'm destined to do. But I had to go through iterations of it, Jai, of making mistakes, of not living what I wanted to do, but seeing what everybody else does, and getting caught up in the construct of that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned it before, but the identity around a job, the identity around the role, the ego that comes with that, losing it all, people are being made redundant. Well, I should say, someone corrected me on this. Their roles are being made redundant, which I thought was a great course correction, and it can shatter people. But when you start to choose it for yourself, it can also shatter you. You can also confront a lot of things that you probably weren't comfortable with before. And, even for me right now, there are things going on where I'm like, I've got this now. I wanted it. No, it's not as good as now that I've got it. But if I don't have it, who will I be? I know you're a journaler. I know you're a prolific journaler. You're never far without your field notes guide. But what's the one piece of advice you'd give somebody, a creative working in an agency, if there was one or two pieces of advice that you live by at the moment?
Around journaling?
Around creativity. I just know you're a journaler, so I know there's 1,000 pieces of advice in your books, and I really appreciate how much every bit of gold you find in the Mojo Sessions podcast, every conversation you have. I really appreciate that you write down that lesson as a lesson. But if you had to pick one piece for a creative in an agency, what would it be?
It'll be one piece that has tentacles. In this day and age, I think the most important thing for me, which I've passed on to anybody who is around me that I work with and or my family, is the ability. So recently, as you know, I interviewed Jonathan B. Smith, and he is the business coach to Chris Voss, who's a hostage negotiator for the FBI, who wrote Never Split the Difference. Big time, and he's his business coach. He just wrote a book called Fight Less, Win More. Great book, one of the most valuable books. He said whenever he's talking with somebody, he always wants to know, who am I talking to?
Yep.
In order to do that, it's about drawing stories out of the other person.
Yeah.
So regardless if I'm in an Uber, I'm at the checkout, I'm at a servo, I'm at the fire station, I'm on the fire ground, I'm with a friend, I meet a new person, all I'm really thinking about is, what's your story? Who am I talking to here?
Yeah.
To help them feel valued, appreciated, seen, heard, making it about the other person. So for creative, I would say the reason that's important is because everybody's loaded with stories. Drawing stories out of people gives you all this fuel from which to draw. And as a creative, to be able to link these stories together, that's something AI can't do yet.
Yeah.
So for me, everyone's got a story. It's really valuable. apart from that, you make people feel valued, you make them feel appreciated. And as Jonathan B. Smith said, the most important thing, one of the greatest learnings for me in the last year is people, when they feel understood, man, the connection is so different. It's a game changer. So having said all that, then the tentacle is, then I would say you've got to have a repository of where to store all these stories.
Yeah.
So you taking a photo of a cold brew tap, that's going into a repository. Whether you look back at it or not, irrelevant. You said to your mind it's important. You visually took a photo. You saw it. You've stored it. The recesses of your mind, there's something there. You recess your mind, put these things together. That's your repository. So I think the journal in whatever form, whether it be digital, like Tiago Forte is building a second brain, gold, or it be a photo bank, it be a written journal. You can see on my journals here, written journal, but you've got to have that repository somewhere to be able to say to your brain, when you write it down or you put it in your repository, it's important. Hey, brain, remember this. Number two, go back to where you are sitting and creating, you're giving your brain space to create. You can flick through your slides. You can flick through your notes. You can flick through your resource file of stuff to do with retail.
Yeah.
So I think having a repository today is critically important, because if you don't take the time to capture and then put somewhere and curate, you're on to the next thing, because the world is just full of so many messages.
Yeah.
And then the last part I'd say is, when you've got that thing, just take 15 minutes on a Sunday morning with the brew and flick through whatever your repository is, just to let your brain start to get new connections, because that's how the brain works with these webs. So I think it's one answer, but number of tentacles. But great creatives are always, you remember Simon Reynolds?
Yeah, of course.
I used to have lunch with Simon every month, and he would sit there and we would talk about stuff, and he would take his watch off and put his watch down to go, this is how much time we have today. And he's put his watch on the table in front of us, and he would sit there and we would talk about stuff, and he would make notes. And I remember talking to somebody who worked in his agency, and he would go to Simon with the brief, and Simon would say, I've got everything I need. Simon would question him, do all the questioning, and he'd say, now leave me alone, close the door. Because then he goes through all these files of all these things he's recorded.
Yeah.
So it's one answer, but I think there's a number of tentacles. And the thing with journals is, don't try and make them photo ready. Don't make them Insta ready.
No.
Write doodles. If there's one word, just write one word, turn the page. If you're a visual person, use color, use doodles, use drawings.
Yeah.
I think journaling's critically important, because we live in a world of squirrels. Next, more. And we don't curate the best stuff.
Could not agree more, mate. And I think understanding how we work and how we process and how we reflect as creatives, I think, is one of the most important things that we can sort of do. I'm really, really grateful for you spending some time with me today, mate. I literally, I know we could just keep doing this and we could just keep going for hours and hours and hours. I really want to do this again. Thanks for sharing your story. I think it is the reason I wanted to speak to you. And as I said at the start, it'll probably be one of the most unique interviews that we do, because you're not specifically, quote unquote, an agency guy, but in one sense you absolutely are, because you've seen it, you've been objective to it. So thank you. I really, really do appreciate it.
Great, man. It's good to see you. Always good to hang out.
Yeah, always good.
Must be time for a cold brew.
Yeah, it's just about, I just finished one coffee actually. I was like, it's time for another one. Thanks for that, buddy. I'll just hit stop on that. And the way this should work is it should just go in the background. It's decided just to keep recording today. How strange. Don't know why I can't turn it off now. That's a weird one. Never had that one before. The other thing too is the editing software for this is inbuilt. It's very,
right.
It's like, so it just goes online, and then I just look at that app and exactly what I edit, like your stuff with in a podcast. What I'll do is I'll hang up the call, and then if you could leave your app open, it mightn't have finished yet, but I'll send you a text message if it's not. But that was great, mate. Thank you so much for that. With the other guests I've had, they don't know how to bucket things as well. And again, that's where that speaking piece comes in. They don't have their sound bites. Agency Land, a Survivors podcast, is hosted and produced by me, Jai Smith, founder and head of creative and strategy at Double Star Co. Our intro track, Crash and Burn, featuring North Lanes by Phase One, used with the kindest of permissions from Fat Cat Music. Special thanks to Carla Munn and Jaron Norton for the art, design, and motion. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, leave us a review, and share it with somebody navigating agency life. Until then, you're good, get better, and stop asking for things.